Hi guys, this is Ashish from Edureka and welcome to this fourth video of Edureka's free Angular course for beginners. In this video, I'm going to talk about data binding. Now in my video on Angular installation, I got a feedback that I didn't show how to configure the ID that I'm using. So before moving into data binding, let me first show you how to set up or configure your ID for developing Angular applications. Well, the ID that I'm using is called as Atom, and it is one of the popular ID for going ahead with Angular app development. So in order to get the Atom ID, you need to visit the website atom.io. Now from the website, download the correct installer as per your operating system. For example, if you have a Windows, then you can go ahead just by clicking this red button. Else you need to check out this section where the installer for other platforms has been provided. Now once you have downloaded the installer, go ahead and install the application or the IDE. Then once you are done with the installation, you need to add some plugin or install some plugin in order to go ahead with Angular app development. So let me show you what are those plugins that you have to install. In Atom, those are called as packages. So you need to go to File, then go to Settings. If you go to the Packages section, all the packages that you need to install are Atom Bootstrap 3, because for styling purposes we will be using Bootstrap, and I'll show you how to install Bootstrap for your Angular project. Then you need to install Atom TypeScript for TypeScript support. Then for terminal, you need to go ahead with platformio-id-terminal. Now in order to install a particular package, go to the install section, and there you have to mention the name of the package that you want to install. For example, I want to go ahead with TypeScript. So I will write TypeScript over here and press enter. Now once you hit enter, you will be provided with all those packages that has the name TypeScript in it. And you have to go ahead with this Atom TypeScript 11.0.9. Now apart from that, you have to go ahead with platformio-id-terminal, and you need to go ahead with Bootstrap 3, this one. So these are the packages, guys, that you need to install. Now once you have installed all these packages, you're good to go with Angular app development. Now from now on, we'll be using Bootstrap extensively for creating the application or for all the demos that I will be showing over here. So let me show you how to install Bootstrap. So if you're using Atom and you have installed the package platformio-id-terminal, you need to go ahead with Alt-Shift-T for opening the terminal. Then you need to go ahead with your project folder inside your project folder. Then again, Bootstrap will be a npm package, so you need to go ahead with the command npm install bootstrap and then --save. The flag --save, what it does is it put your dependencies, that is Bootstrap, in your package.json file. So that whenever you are committing your project on GitHub or you're sharing your project with someone else, that guy could go ahead with the command npm install. That command will look to your package.json file and install all those dependencies that is required for running your Angular application. Check out this package.json. You will find that Bootstrap has been mentioned over here, as you can see. Basically, this dependency or the Bootstrap package will be installed inside your node models folder. So you can check that as well. Here you can see this is the package name that we have installed, the Bootstrap package. Once you have installed Bootstrap, you need to mention it or tell your application that whenever it starts up, it should import that Bootstrap style sheet while bundling your application. So remember in the second video when we discussed the project structure, all the files, then I talked about angular-cli.json file, and specifically I talked about this styles array where you put all your global style sheet that has to be bundled along with your Angular application. So here we're going to mention the path for our Bootstrap style sheet so that whenever your application is being rendered, your Bootstrap style sheet will be bundled along. So I'll go ahead by providing the path. So node modules, then you go to Bootstrap, then you go to dist, then you go to sys, then bootstrap.min.css. So that's the path that I'm talking about. Now let's go ahead and run our application. So I'll go ahead with command npm start. Basically npm start and ngserve are pretty much similar. This npm start would execute ngserve in the end, as you can see. This has been mentioned in my package.json file, all the scripts, as we have talked about this earlier as well, where this npm start command would execute ngserve. If I go ahead with my localhost 4200, so as you can see, the font has been changed. That indicates that Bootstrap has been added. Or what you can do, you can inspect your file. Then you can go ahead inside head, then this style sheet, and you can see that the Bootstrap has been bundled along with your application. Basically what happens is, behind the scene, the CLI, the command line tool for Angular, uses a tool called as Webpack, which bundles your JavaScript and CSS or style sheet files and then adds them to the index.html file. That's why whenever you render your application or whenever you execute ngserve command, in the end you get this message from the Webpack because it has successfully performed all the bundling. So if I go ahead and do the page source, as you can see that all these scripts are the same script that has been generated by your Webpack. So here is your styles.bundle.js, and here you can see that we have Bootstrap added. Alright then, so we have learned how to configure IDE. Apart from Atom, there are other IDEs as well. For example, you can go ahead with Microsoft's VS Code, or you can go ahead with WebStorm by JetBrains or Sublime Text 3. My personal recommendation would be Atom and VS Code. Now the reason that I am recommending Microsoft's VS Code is because TypeScript is also developed by Microsoft and is a recommended language for going ahead with Angular application. So I don't think I need to mention anything else. You can do the math and go ahead with VS Code as well. Now let's get back to our slide and start learning about data binding. So in my previous video, I talked about component and we learned that component essentially has two parts. One is business logic where all your codes or logics are written. And the second one is template or view, the visual part of component that you see or a user see when it opens a website on web browser. Together these two make a component. Now the question is how to connect these two, or if a data or property has been defined inside my component class, how to bind that property value to template. So that is where your data binding comes into picture. So basically data binding is the connection bridge between your view, the template that you see, and the business logic, the codes, the logics that you write inside your component class. So whenever you want to connect all those properties, all the codes that you have written inside your component class to your template or to some interaction that has been performed on your template. So for example, if a user click on a button, you want certain code to be executed, you go ahead with data binding. Now, based on the direction in which data binding works, that is either it is from your component class to your template, or it is from template to your component class, Angular provides 4 types of data binding. So the easiest one of them is called as interpolation. So basically in interpolation, the flow is from your component class to your DOM. So any property that you have inside your component, for example, suppose I have 2 properties or 2 variables which has a string value inside my component, and what I want is I want to display the value of those property in my template. So for that I can go ahead and use interpolation. So let's go ahead and understand what is interpolation practically. So if I go to my IDE, so I'll go ahead with my first component and this is my template. So here what we were doing, we were hard coding the content that we want to display in our browser. So now what I want is, I don't want to hard code all those text that I want to show. Instead, what I want is, I want to have a property inside my component. For example, I want a property as heading 2, which will be of type string. I want to set the value as IAM component first component. So now if you check over here, this is the component that is being rendered over here, and this is the content that we are able to see. Now what I want is, instead of this hard-coded content, I want this property to be binded with my HTML h2 tag or the h2 element, so that the value of this variable or the property that I have defined over here should be displayed on my browser. So for that what I'll do interpolation. So for interpolating any property that you have inside your component class, you go ahead with double curly braces, and inside that you put the property name, in our case which is heading 2. So as you can see, we are having the same content being displayed over here, and if I make some changes over here, I love interpolation. So you can see the same has been displayed on our browser. Basically, in interpolation, all those property that can be resolved in the end to a type string can be interpolated. Apart from that, you can also go ahead with expression such as, for example, what I want now is, I'll go ahead with again h2 tag, and this time what I want is, I want to display 1 plus 1, and if I run it, you can see that 1 plus 1 has been displayed over here. equals to, then I'm going to do interpolation, and here I'm going to go ahead with 1 plus 1. So if I do this, you can see that that expression has been evaluated, and then finally the final result has been resolved to string and then displayed over here. Similarly, what I can do is I can go ahead and give the name of a function that I'll define inside my component class that returns a string. For example, what I can do is, suppose I'm creating a function called as return string, and there I want to return this value, and then I want to call that function over here. So again, as you can see, the same content is being displayed. So that string has been returned for our function. First the function is called, then that string value has returned, and finally interpolated so as to display on your browser. So again, if I make some changes, string return, so you can see that that is being displayed over here. So that is the reason that since the flow is from your component to your template, it is in a one direction. That's why it's called as one-way data binding. We have three types of data binding that has only one direction. The first one is this interpolation. The second that we will learn is called as property binding. The flow is same, again from component to your template. Now, the third one is different in terms of direction, but again that one is also a one-way data binding. Only the direction differs, that is, the direction is from your template to your component class. So for example, you want to capture some event such as clicking a button, and you want to execute certain course that is there in your component class, then you use event binding. We'll see all of them one by one. So I guess you have understand interpolation. It is very easy to use, guys. All you have to do is put your property name inside your double curly braces, and it will be binded with your template. So that is the markup that you have to use for interpolation, that is double curly braces. Now the second one is property binding, as I discussed. As the name suggests, again it is the same. You are binding the property that is there in your component class with that of the property of some HTML element in your DOM or in your template. So let's go ahead and perform a simple property binding. So what I have done, I have copied an image inside my assets folder, edureka_logo.png, and what I want to do is I want to display this image on my template. So I'll go ahead and I'll use something called as image tag. Let me put a ruler, then I'll go ahead with image, and this image element has a property called as source, where you give the path or URL of the image that you want to display. So in our case, I'm going to go ahead with assets and then Edureka logo.png. So now if I go ahead and check my browser, you can see the image is being displayed over here. Now what I want is, instead of providing the hard-coded path, I want to use one of the property that I will be creating inside my component, which will be set to the value of the path that where the image is residing. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go ahead and have a property as image URL, which will be of type string, and I'm going to go ahead with the path. So this is the path that I'm talking about. If I copy it up and I put it inside and I put. So now what I want is, I want to bind this property, this image URL property, to the source property of my image HTML element. So here what I'll do, first I will use the syntax for your property binding, that is square brackets. So you put the property of your HTML element inside square bracket, then you provide the property name to which you want to bind it. So in our case, we're going to go ahead with image URL. So now as you can see, the image has being displayed over here. Now one more thing to notice over here is, we can also go ahead and use interpolation instead of property binding. So for that, if you remember, as I said, in interpolation, the property that you put inside your double curly braces is resolved to string and finally displayed. So what I can do, if I interpolate this, again this value will be resolved to a string value. That will be the value that we have provided over here, this value, and finally our image will be displayed. So as you can see, the image is again being displayed. So it's up to you where you want to use interpolation or you want to go ahead with property binding. It totally depends on you. Both can be used interchangeably. Wherever you feel like you're gonna go ahead with property binding, you can go ahead with that, or you can use interpolation at the same time. So I guess we have covered interpolation and property binding. Now let us discuss about event binding. So in case of event binding, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create an event, that is click of a button, and then we want some codes to be executed once that button has been clicked. So let's go ahead and do that. So for example, so as to understand if the value of a property gets changed and you have interpolated it, so the same change will be reflected on your browser or not, let's go ahead and check that. So we'll create a function over here as change value. All right. And then what we want is we want to change the value of heading 2 and set it as this value has been changed. All right. Now I want to go ahead and create a button, and I'll name it as change value. And then I want to add an event, click event. And whenever that click event happens, whenever a user click a button, I want to execute the code that is defined in my change value function inside my component class. So I'll go ahead with change value, as you can see. And the thing that I want to change is, let's go ahead with an HR and then H2 tag. And here I'm going to go ahead with heading 2. All right. Now if I check my browser, you can see that this is the heading 2 tag. Okay, I did the mistake. I didn't use interpolation. So now you can see that I have this I love interpolation string value. Your heading 2 has been binded with your h2 tag. That's why you are seeing the value that has been initially set to your heading 2 property. And now whenever I click this button, that value is being changed. So that is what is happening. That's why it's called as data binding. So basically you have binded the property. Whenever the value of the property will be changed, it will be reflected on your browser. And similarly, we have also performed the event binding. So whenever you click on this button and you want that code to be executed, that code that we have written inside our change value function, that is done by your event binding, which is using your curve braces. So if you go ahead and you see that, so what I did, basically I used the curve braces so as to mention an event that I want, the event is click, and then finally I binded that event with that of your function that I want to be executed. So I guess you have understood everything. You have understood what is interpolation, you have understood what is property binding, and you have understood what is event binding. Now what we'll do a simple demo, and we'll again use all these concepts that we have learned so far. Along with that, I also want to show you how to create component using Angular CLI, because in our previous video, we have manually created this component. If you remember what we did, we created a class, TypeScript class, and then we created a template file HTML. Then what we did using @component decorator, we added the metadata for that component class so that it becomes a component or it is decorated as a component. But there is an easier way to do that. So again, I'm going to go ahead with a new terminal, Alt-Shift-T. If you're again using Atom and this same package, platform you, then you can toggle between or switch between different terminals that you have opened up using Alt-Shift-J. So if I do that, you can see that. And for opening a new terminal, you go ahead with Alt-Shift-T. So now inside my project folder, for generating a component, you have to go ahead with ng generate command, followed by component because we want to create a component, and then the name of the component. In our case, it will be GOT character. All right, now hit enter. Now once you do that, you can see that all these 3 files have been created automatically. Apart from that, your component declaration has been added to your app.module.ts file as well, which is your root module. And as we discussed earlier, that whenever you are creating a new component, you need to go ahead and mention it inside your module. And there's one more file that is being created called as gotcharacter.component.spec.ts. That is the file for testing. So now let's go ahead and see our new component. So this is the component, guys, as you can see over here, that has been generated by your CLI. Now here you can see we have a function called as constructor, which I wanted to talk about. So basically, whenever your component, this component will be loaded on your browser, this function will be executed. So this is the first function that will be executed, and also the ng on init. On initialization, it will be executed. So whenever you want to put such a method or such code that has to be executed in the first place, whenever your component get instantiated, you need to go ahead and use these 2 functions. So let's go ahead and do something over here. So first, let's go ahead and create a string array. So I'll go ahead and create an array as GOT character of type string, and which will be an array. Now I will have one more array as GOT character first name, which will be of type string, and it will be an array. And I will initialize the value as the first name of the GOT characters. So the first one is John, then we have Arya, then we have Cersei, and then we have Daenerys. And then again, I want to copy this string array, and this will be the last name. I'll set it as Snow, Stark, Lannister, Targaryen. Now, as I told you, if I put something inside our constructor function, then that line of code will be executed in the first place. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll be using a JavaScript function called a setInterval. What it does is it executes your code, whatever code that you have written inside it, the function, it will be called in an interval that you specify. For that, the first argument will be of that function that you want to be called, and the second one will be the time, the interval that you want to have for your function calling. So for that, I'm going to go ahead with ES6 function. So this is a simple way to declare or to define a function. Now this arrow6 function is similar to what we'd go ahead and create a function. For example, if I go ahead and create a function, some function, and then I go ahead like this, it's pretty much similar to that. Now inside my function, I'm going to go ahead with this dot GOT character equals to this dot GOT character first name. All right. And then what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and create one more variable and initialize it with 0. And then I'm going to put some if method over here. And there I'm going to go ahead with if I modulo 2 equals to 0. Basically, I'm going to check whether I is even or not. I forgot this. And then I'm going to put ahead my this dot GOT character equal to this dot GOT character first name inside my if block. In case it is odd, I'm going to put this as this dot GOT character equals to this dot GOT character last name. And then I'm going to iterate over or increment my I each time. Again, this dot I. All right. Whenever I'm inside my if block, I want to console that I'm inside if block. And here I want to console that I am inside my else block. All right, now let's go ahead and provide the second parameter, which is the interval time that I want over here is, let's go ahead with 3 seconds, that is 3000 milliseconds. Yeah, so we are good to go. Now let's go ahead and use our template. Here what I want is I want a list which will show the character or the value of character array that I have created inside my component. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and create my list and this li tag, and inside that I want my character array to be displayed. Now I want to copy this 4 times, and this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. Now again I'm going to use interpolation, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And if I go ahead and check my browser, you can see nothing is being displayed over here because we forgot something. We didn't nested this GOT character component inside the component that is being displayed over here. So we're going to go ahead with my first component, and I'm going to delete all these, and then I'm going to use my selector tag app-GOT character. Now if I see, we have this list over here, and as you can see, the value is being switched in every 3 seconds because I have wrote the code in such fashion. All right, now what I want is I want to put a button. So whenever I press that button, I want this value to be switched. So let's go ahead and create a function, switch first and last name. This is my function. And then I'm going to put all this code over there. Now let's link this function using event binding with the button that we want to have. So we're going to go ahead and have a button, and I'm going to say switch names. And then I'm going to bind it using event binding. And remember, we use curly braces so as to bind an event. So I'm going to go ahead and bind my click event with that of my switch first and last name function. Now, as you can see right now, nothing is happening because that code that we did, which was inside constructor, has been put all inside my function. So once I do that, it will start executing that function, and then finally the name will be displayed. So what I want is, I want the character to be displayed initially. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'm going to put it inside my constructor. Now, once I click this button, that switch will start happening, as you can see. Now, the second thing that I'm going to show over here is, I'm going to show you how to use Bootstrap. So let's go ahead and use that. I'm going to go ahead and add Bootstrap class over here. So the first class that I'll be using is called as list group. And over here, I want to use class as list group item. Now let's copy this and put it inside all my li tags. Now, as you can see, the Bootstrap has been added. I'm going to go ahead and do the same with my button. So let's go ahead and use a class and provide button primary. So the button has been changed. The blue color background has been added. Now let's go ahead and use property binding as well. So what I want now is, suppose if I click a button, I want one more button that will stop the switch to happen. Okay, so whatever switch that is being happening over here, I want that button to stop this switching. And the second thing I want is, I want that button to be activated only when this first button switch names has been executed or has been clicked. So let's go ahead and do that as well. So for that, what I'll do, I'll go ahead and create one more button, and I'll name it as stop. And then let me add Bootstrap style. So I'm gonna go ahead with button danger this time, and I'm gonna add an event stop switch first and last. All right, now let's go ahead and create our function stop switch first and last. Now what I want is, I want to stop that execution of that set interval method. So what your set interval method does is, it provides you, or it returns you an object. Using that, you can stop that set interval method from being executed. So I'm going to go ahead and create an object over here, and I'm going to name it as stop switch. All right, which will be of type any. And then I'm going to retrieve this return object that will be returned from your set interval method, and I'm going to store it in my stop switch variable over here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Stop switch equals to set interval. So I'm going to go ahead with my clear interval method, and there I'm going to provide my this dot stop switch. All right, so we have done the first part. So if I go ahead and do this, and if the switch has been started, then I can go ahead and use my stop method to stop this from happening. And if you inspect it on the console, you can see we are going ahead with my if block, else block, then if block. But this stop button should be activated only when the switch names has been clicked, or when the switch is happening. So let's go ahead and use our property binding. So I'm going to create a property known as stop switch status. I'm going to set it as true. All right, now whenever this method or the first button has been clicked, I'm going to put it as false. This dot stop switch status, and I'm going to put it as false, and here I want it as true. Now to bind this property with the property of my button element, I'm going to go ahead and use one property known as disabled. All right, so if you set this value as true over here, the button will be disabled, and same you can observe over here, it has been disabled. But I want to disable this button dynamically, so I'll use property binding again. and I'll bind it with my switch status, stop switch status. Now, as you can see, the button is disabled over here. Now, once I click this button, this will become enabled so that you can use it, and I can use it like this manner. So now we have learned how to use this property binding, event binding, and interpolation. Here you can see for displaying the array, we have used the indexing, the index of the element explicitly. This is not the good way or the best way to do it. In the next section, when we will be discussing about directives, I'll show you an easier way or the preferable way to iterate over an list and finally display it. Now, the only form of data binding that is being left over here is two-way data binding. So remember, in the first component, what we did is we first created a property, we set it with some of the value, then finally we displayed it. Then we created a button event, and once you click that button, the value of that property that is being interpolated got changed, right? So that is what two-way data binding is. Now there is an easier way to implement your two-way data binding. So what I want over here is I want my one input placeholder, and then let's go ahead with some value. All right, two-way data. Let's name our variable, and I'm gonna again use property binding over here. And then I'll go inside my component class and I'll create that function two-way data, and I'm gonna set it as Tedian. Now as you can see, we are having the same input placeholder over here. Now what I want is I want a div tag over here, and inside this div tag I'm gonna go ahead and put this input element, and I'm gonna interpolate that property that we have just created, the value property. So I'm gonna interpolate this over here. All right, so as you can see, this is what is happening. Now if I change the value of that property is not being changed. So let's go ahead and implement two-way data binding, and then we'll understand what does it mean actually. So for that, we use something called as ngModel, which is a directive that is used to go ahead with two-way data binding. I'll go ahead with ngModel and the name of the property that I want, which is two-way data. Now, in order to use ngModel, you need to import forms module. That is the module in which your ngModel definition resides. So I'll go ahead inside my app.module, and here I'll import forms module from @angular/forms. Once you have imported certain module, you need to go ahead and put that module name inside imports array as well. So I'll go ahead and do that. All right. Now, as you can see, we are having this error over here. The reason is same because just now we imported this. Now, if I change the value over here, for example, I go ahead with my name, you can see the same thing is being displayed on your template. So the communication is happening in both ways. So whenever that I'm using this input placeholder, that event is happening. So the event binding takes place. So I'm gonna go ahead with this time two-way. That event is changing the value of the property that we defined, that is two-way data. And finally, that two-way data is, since it is being interpolated, the value that we have entered just now, the modified value, is being displayed over here. So that is what two-way data binding is. So I guess you have understood all the forms of data binding over here. You have understood how to perform two-way data binding, how to go ahead with property binding. For property binding, you have square brackets. For event binding, you go ahead with curly brackets. For interpolation, you go ahead with curly braces. Now, in case of two-way data binding, you go ahead with curve bracket inside square bracket. Thus, you are having property binding and event binding at the same time. Now, one more example of property binding is using property binding, you can pass the data from your parent component to your child component. Let's understand what I'm trying to say. So suppose you have your parent component, as you can see over here. This is your parent component, and you want to pass some data. The data that is there inside your parent component, you want to pass it to your child component. Let's go ahead and do this parent-child communication as well. So for that, as you know, we have put our GOT character component selector tag inside first component. So if you see the first component HTML or template, you can see that we have nested our GOT character component over here. So basically it means that the first component is the parent component of your GOT character component. Now here what I want is, I want to pass some data that is there in my parent component to my child component, that is GOT character. So let's go ahead and do this. Now for example, what I want is, I want to send this path that is there inside my first component to my child component. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this value to some variable called as image URL child, and I'm going to bind it with my image URL that is there inside my parent. Now if I go to my child component, my GOT character component, for getting the value that has been sent from my parent component, I need to use something called as input, @input. So I'll go ahead and use that input, and I want to input something known as image URL child. As you can see, this is the same property that we have passed or that we have binded in our parent component. So as you can see, the name input cannot be found because we haven't imported it. Let's go ahead and do that as well. Now let's go inside our template, and here I'm going to use that data that has been passed from my parent component in order to display the image. So I'll go ahead with image, and here I'm going to go ahead with image URL child. Now as you can see, the image is being displayed over here, and in fact let's go ahead and do something else. So I'm going to console it out, console.log, and I want to console test.image URL child. Now if you see the console, as you can see, we are having this path being transferred to my child component, that is GOT character component. The path is //asset/edureka_logo.png. So now you have understood this constructor, and this ng-on-init method gets initialized in the first place whenever your component gets instantiated. And you have also understood how to use property binding for passing data from your parent component to your child component. All you have to do is you have to use this @input function, and there you have to specify the property on which you want your data to be passed. And then in your parent component, you pass your data inside your selector tags. There you use the same property name which is there in your child component, and there you finally use the property binding to bind it with the property that is defined in your parent component. So it is pretty much simple to use. So that's it, guys. It was all about data binding. We learned all forms of data binding that is provided by Angular. Now in the next video, we'll be talking about directives, where I'll show you how to use your structural directives, those inbuilt directives. Then we'll also learn how to create our own custom directive. Till then, have fun. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply to them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to our Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!